hello everyone, and welcome to ProLine, direct from Las Vegas, the gaming capital of the world. It's week 3 of the NFL preseason. I'm John Cran, going to be joined by longtime Vegas cappers Jim Feist and Sean Hess. Going to look at some of the upcoming games for week 3 of the NFL preseason. Also going to ask these Vegas experts on line movement what are some of their observations are when they see it. But first, let's tell you what we have going on. Jim Feist, 11-3 NFL preseason run. August has been money time. He was 2-0 on Friday with the Saints and the Seahawks, 4-0 Saturday. High roller release on the Ravens. He had that rare systems release on the Texans. They won 32-7, a no-sweat cover, unless Sean, you know somebody who had the Falcons at plus 26.
Nobody.
Was that you?
Nobody. No teaser goes that big. No teaser goes that big.
Well, for this weekend, Jim has another high roller release available. If you want to get that, you can get that by going to jimfeist.com. Also want to remind you that Mr. Vegas, he had a big total that went down. However, that was the only play that didn't work for Mr. Vegas. 8-1 NFL preseason weekend. I included 2-0 on Sunday with Carolina Panthers. He had the 49ers Broncos under the total. He's going to step up this weekend with his NFL preseason game of the year. That's available at jimfeist.com. You want to go to Jim's website, you see that football helmet in the lower left. That's the link to jimfeist.com. Just click on it. All right, we're going to start with our Twitter question of the week. You can ask Jim and anyone on the panel a question. You can get involved just by going to Twitter at Jim Feist Sports or at Facebook at ProLine TV. If you use your question, you're put into a drawing to win $100 a place from any handicapper of your choice. Judy Hines of Centerville, Ohio asked, the public was betting the over in week 1. Every game they were betting over. What insight do you get when you watch line movement beyond what the public is thinking? Sean, how do you assess all that line movement that takes place during the week?
Well, most of that happened, as you know, in week 2. And the only thing I can think of, because preseason, who knows how many guys are going to play and for how long they're going to be there, is there's a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes. There can be a defensive touchdown scored. Somebody can pick up a ball and run 90 yards. That'll cut a drive off, something like that. And I guess maybe for some reason, the public, if you want to call it the public, I'm not real big on that concept. The betting market is comprised of a lot of different segments. And this thing about Joe Public is maybe a little worn out. Maybe 25 years ago, there might have been that concept. There's a lot of sharp money out there. And as you know, people come into Vegas, and a lot of these people do this for a living. But the only thing I can think of is a lot more mistakes, so opportunities to score, and a lot more energy being out there because, after week 2, players are looking to get cut. Coaches are looking to see who their starting lineups are going to be. So game 3, game 4, they might have less opportunities to show what they're going to do. So anything I can, and as a matter of fact, I think these games did go over, right? A lot of these preseason games for
week
this
2
week,
they did, yep.
Like massively over, like New England, 42-35. Nobody saw that coming. That game flew way over. So the only thing I can think of historically is more mistakes, which are more opportunities for scoring after the first week.
Yeah, one time when I was talking with Jimmy Vaccaro, a long-time line maker, I brought up a Miami Hurricane Thursday night marquee game where the line actually moved 8 points. And I mentioned, well, what was happening here? Yeah. And he said, in that example, number one, it's a marquee game, so it's the only game on the board. So don't get crazy with observing the line movement. And when it goes to, 6, 7, or 8 points, you're starting to lose value. And then he asked me, what was the final score of the game? And it was about a 7-point game. And he said, see, when it gets to 8 like that, from the line, the odds makers aren't that dumb. They don't make that bad a number. So as that line is moving, you want to get it early, but there comes a point as the line moves a lot where you're starting to lose value, so you better staying off.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever noticed it or not, but when line makers put out games like for next week or future games, they rarely put up totals. They put the sides up first before they put the totals. And usually if there's an injury, they'll move the line, but a lot of times they'll take the total down. They're always more nervous with some, even especially in the NBA. I've seen NBA lines historically in any given day move as much as 6 points on the totals. The sides don't move that much. For some reason, injuries or something like that, or a controversy with a player or something like Donald Sterling coming up, that kind of stuff, they always take off the totals, but they're not afraid of the sides. I've never understood that. Plus, the betting numbers for totals are always a lot less. They'll take a lot less on totals than they will on the sides. It's just the way it is. They're just afraid of totals. So.
All right, let's get into our first game this weekend for week 3. It's going to be a Friday game. The Jets are going to be playing the Giants, a rivalry battle, a little bit for the Big Apple, home game for both teams. And speaking of line movement, the Jets opened 1-point favorite. Now the Giants are the favorite of -1, total of 43. And if you look back at last year's game, Jets won the game 24-21, surprisingly high-scoring game. In fact, the Jets even though they struggled with offense all season long, they had 420 yards that game, and the Giants just had 322 yards. Jets had 388 yards passing that game. Geno Smith, who was then a rookie, had 199 yards. They let him throw the ball 30 times. But no, he had 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. That was a problem all last season. And even Eli Manning struggled against the Jets defense. 8 of 20 passing, 83 yards. In fact, the 2 Giant quarterbacks were sacked 4 times. So despite that final score, last year's game was more of a defensive game than you might think. And that's how I'm going to look at this game, because when I look at the Jets, all kinds of offensive problems last year, but a great defense. Rex Ryan deserves a lot of accolades for rebuilding the aging Jet defense very fast over the last 2 to 3 years. But it did come at a cost of kind of ignoring a little bit the offense, which is why they certainly have these quarterback problems. Geno Smith, Mike Vick, and even Taj Boyd and Matt Sims, certainly questionable. And when you look at what they've happened in preseason, hasn't really been an offensive preseason for them. They beat the Colts 13-10. The defense was the story, allowing 222 yards. And then last week they beat the Bengals 25-17. They allowed under 300 yards. And the offense was just 5 of 13 on third down. They had 12 penalties overall. And they had 169 rush yards, the Jets did. So it's still a run-first conservative offense and very much the defensive-first New York Jets team. And then there's the Giants offense. This is the 4th game for the Giants, which is often a plus this time in August. However, the offense just hasn't got going. What's happening is they brought in a new offensive coordinator in Ben McAdoo. He's brought in a new playbook, trying to get them going more up-tempo, and it just hasn't worked. They've scored 17-13 victory in the opener against the Bills, and despite the fact they're 3-0, they have had offensive problems, scored 20 points against the Steelers, and then last week they had a 27-3 lead against the Colts, had to hang on for a 1-point victory. But take a closer look. Eli Manning in that game was 1 of 7 for 6 yards, so it wasn't quite the offensive show. The wide receivers in particular for the Giants have really not gotten going at all. And Manning admitted this week that he's still comfortable with the offense, even though it's going to take a lot to understand some of the nuances. So I see, Sean, I see a defensive game going under the total. How do you assess this Big Apple rivalry clash?
Well, John, I think you pretty well claimed the plate, right? You pretty much stole all my thunder here. But I do have a few notes on the game. First of all, you're right. Giants are 3-0 straight up and against the number, and they've out-yarded their opponents in each of their games. And, yeah, Manning has not looked good so far. That fourth quarter comeback last week, which was just really incredible, was without him. He was 1 for 7 for 6 yards, hardly Super Bowl numbers. And last year, 18 touchdown passes, 27 interceptions. He got sacked 39 times. And this is in a very weak division. I have always liked Tom Coughlin. This is his 11th year at the helm. He's won 2 Super Bowls. I want to make a comment about this rivalry thing. Both of these coaches have been with these teams for a while. I think Ryan's in his 6th year, Coughlin's in his 11th year, and he was with Jacksonville before that. He's a veteran coach. This is no rivalry game as far as these coaches. This is still preseason. They're not going to forget that. Now, I'm from that area up there, and, yeah, those fans are going to go nuts. This reminds me, if you're old enough to remember, the old Brooklyn Dodger, New York Yankee rivalry. I mean, they could go out on a sandlot, even now, those old players, and if they played, all those old guys would show up because in their minds it's a rivalry, but it's not a rivalry game as far as he's coaching. They both have to straighten out offensive problems, especially with the New York Jets. They're 2-0 straight up and against the number. They've also out-yarded their opponents. And, yeah, like you mentioned, quarterback Geno Smith hardly looking like any first-round draft choice. He's up 12 touchdown passes last year, 21 interceptions, did not look good. And Ryan is not running his mouth as much this year. I don't know if you know, he's not challenging Bill Belichick anymore. He's not doing stuff like that. I think he's more focused on getting this team to go. The only team he really has to worry about in the AFC East is probably, guess who? Standard one. Bill Belichick and the Patriots are the big problem. But he's done well with them in the past. So the line, I looked at this morning, just before we started to do the show. The line is pick 'em. It's pretty much settled. Each team was favored by 1. The total pretty much at 42.5. I think that's a decent number. I think you're right, a little bit of a defensive thing here. But the fact is, both of these teams need to straighten out their offenses. And I think both coaches will look to do some scoring to get that offensive machine going, because so far it's been bad. And Coughlin's a coach who's going to remember last year real bad. They started out 0-6 straight up, and they just simply dug that hole too deep, and they were never able to recover. One other thing I want to mention, week 3 has always been considered this dress rehearsal thing. I think that's crap. It's media stuff. I wouldn't pay attention to it. It's preseason. Preseason means you fix the holes that you have. Forget rivalry games. Forget dress rehearsal. Yeah, if either one of those teams late has a chance to win the game, give the fans something to go home about, but not at the expense of somebody getting hurt. Their deal is to solve the problems from last year. That's what preseason's for. I think the line is pretty close to where it should be. 42.5 sounds about right, but I would be looking for more scoring because I think both of these coaches know they need to get those offenses going. That's how I see it.
Okay, well, I'm going to take the contrarian view. I think it's going to be a defensive game. When I look back at the meetings from 2 years ago, Giants won 26-3, and then before that, in 2011, the Jets won 17-3. So historically, it has been a game where the defenses have been ahead of the offenses.